If today were the last time you saw the one you love most, not because they're moving far away, but because you can't follow. If today were the last time you heard your mother call your name, the last afternoon you held your father's hand walking through the garden behind the house, the last moment you looked into the eyes of the one you promised you'd never leave, what would you say? Would you stay silent? Or would you wish more than anything to go back, just to hold them once more? I know this isn't something anyone wants to think about, but sooner or later, it comes for all of us. Some have already lived through it. Some are still living in it quietly, every day. And some have never lost anyone, so they believe they never will. But in truth, we all share the same hidden question. After we die, will we still recognize each other? Will I ever see them again somewhere beyond time, beyond flesh? A man once asked me that. His name was Daniel. He wasn't religious. He didn't go to church, didn't read scripture, didn't believe in heaven in any traditional sense. But when his wife passed from cancer, and their 7-year-old daughter wouldn't stop asking, "Where's Mom now? Daddy, will I get to see her again?" Daniel, the man who once believed in nothing, suddenly had more questions than anyone. He told me, "I don't need heaven. I just need one more chance to hold my wife again. Just once. That would be enough." Have you ever felt something like that? Have you ever walked past a funeral and silently wondered, are they watching me now? Are souls even real? If I die, will I still remember the ones I loved? We live as if death is far away, but death has never been far from any of us. The question isn't when, it's this. What happens after? In this video, we won't debate reincarnation. We won't argue whether heaven or hell are real. Instead, we'll walk into a key-to deeper question. Does love still exist after death? And if it does, how could we ever know that we'll still recognize one another in that invisible space beyond this life? I won't pretend to give you an absolute answer, but I will walk you through 6 quiet signs, subtle but strong, signs that perhaps the deepest connections we've made don't disappear. Even when the body returns to dust, if you're living with the memory of someone you still miss, if you've lost someone without saying your last goodbye, if you fear the day you leave this world, unsure if anyone will still remember you, then this video is for you. And if something in you still hasn't found peace, stay with me, not to find a conclusion, but to remember something deep inside you that you may have dropped on the day they left. Some forms of grief don't come from tragedy. There's no blood, no screaming. No one falls to the ground, crying out in pain. There's only silence, a silence that stretches on forever. You can't call them, you can't write them a letter, you can't send a message and hope for a reply, because the person you love is no longer in this world. Losing someone you love isn't just about losing them, it's about losing a part of yourself. They were the one who called your name in a way no one else did, who touched your shoulder in that exact spot where only they knew how, who looked at you not with their eyes, but with a kind of knowing, and then it's all gone in a single breath. Why does it hurt this much? Because deep down, we don't just fear death, we fear something far worse, that they leave and we never find them again, that everything we once shared vanishes forever. That memory is only memory. Some try to reason through it. Life and death. It's the natural cycle. Everything is impermanent. Everyone dies, eventually. But the heart doesn't listen to those words. The heart only hears this: I lost someone I love, and I no longer know who I am without them. In Stoic philosophy, there's a concept called sympathia. The deep interconnectedness of all things. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Everything is interwoven in a fragile web, where nothing truly disappears. It only transforms." And Epictetus said, "Don't grieve because they are gone. Be grateful because they were ever here." But even philosophers cry, because reason may be strong, but a heart torn in half still longs to be held. Let's be honest with ourselves. Have you ever looked at an old photo and burst into tears, heard a familiar voice and felt your breath catch, walked into an empty room and silently wished someone was still there, waiting? That's because memory does not die, love does not vanish, and the soul, if it truly exists, may still be near, in ways the mind cannot understand. Someone once said, "Only the living suffer. The dead are at peace." But I don't agree. The dead may have gone far, but it's us, the ones who remain, who carry the weight of love left behind. That's why we don't just live for ourselves anymore. We live with an ache. Will we ever see them again after all of this? Maybe you've never spoken that question aloud, but in the quietest nights, when the noise fades, when the roles drop, when there's no one left to impress, you still wonder, do they still remember me? Where are they now? Will I ever hold their hand again, even just once? And perhaps, the greatest question of all, do the sacred bonds between us survive death? That's why we search, not to cling, but to understand, to accept, to live more fully with what still remains. I once heard someone say, through tears. It's been 3 years since my father passed, but every time I go through something painful, I dream of him. Not a long dream, just him standing at the end of the hallway, smiling. But it happens every time. Have you ever experienced something like that? An old song plays just when you were thinking of them. A familiar scent floats past you in a crowded street. A number repeats, matching their birthday, their time of death, their name. You might think it's all coincidence, but if those coincidences happen exactly when you need them most, what do you call that? Maybe their soul never left. Maybe the bond between two people, once it has touched the depth of real love, can't be broken by death. Science may never be able to prove it. Spirituality may not give us a clear answer, but your heart may already know. A woman named Eleanor once told me, "After my son died in an accident, I walked around like a ghost. But one day, while I was crying on the balcony, a blue butterfly landed on my hand. I never believed in signs, but ever since then, every time I fall apart, there's always a blue butterfly nearby." The strangest part, at his funeral, I wore a sea blue dress, the one he had picked out for my birthday. Eleanor never tried to convince anyone. She simply said, "I don't need people to understand. I just need to feel that my son is still somewhere, still watching over me." Have you ever felt that someone you love might still be here? Not in body, but in presence, maybe in a dream. A breeze that slips through the window at the exact right moment. A ray of sunlight falling perfectly on an old photograph. Stoicism doesn't reject the mystery. The Stoics weren't so rational that they became emotionless. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Every soul is a piece of the universe, and nothing that belongs to the universe is ever truly lost." And Epictetus once said, "We are only visitors here. When someone leaves, they are simply returning home." Do you believe that? Not as doctrine, but as something you can feel in the deepest solitude, when something whispers that someone is still very near. Be honest. Has something strange ever calmed you while you cried? Have you ever whispered to someone who's passed and quietly received an answer? Have you ever wished to hold someone again and then dreamt of doing exactly that? We can call it emotional hallucination. We can label it as grief-induced delusion. But perhaps That's how the ones we've lost return, not to scare us, but to keep us from feeling alone. No one knows for certain if heaven exists, but one thing is hard to deny. True love doesn't stop when the heart stops beating. It finds a way to remain, in forms no one expects. A friend once told me, "I can't see my mother anymore, but I still live as if she's here, watching me, waiting for me to live in a way she'd be proud of." Maybe that's how the dead still live with us, not in form, but in influence, not in voices, but in presence, quiet, unseen, and steady. And if the soul truly endures, then perhaps the thread that connects us to them has never been cut. It's only stepped aside for a while, so we can learn to live stronger, deeper, and more whole. His name was Michael, a man in his early 50s, a plumber by trade, rough hands, few words, the kind of man who always said, "All that soul talk, that's just weakness in disguise." Until the day his son Joshua died in a car accident. At just 18 years old, Michael didn't cry at the funeral, didn't collapse like his wife, didn't write a goodbye letter, didn't make a memorial video. He just went quiet. From the day Joshua passed, he never entered his son's room again, never changed the sheets, never touched the books, never opened the laptop. He said, "I don't believe in souls, but I also don't believe he's really gone." Some nights, he would stand outside the door, hand resting on the knob, but never turning it. Each time, he'd whisper, just one question, "Are you still here?" 3 months after the funeral, strange things began to happen. First, the wall clock stopped. Every night, at exactly 11:11, then the desk lamp in Joshua's room began turning on by itself each morning, though no one touched it. Then came the old song, "What a Wonderful World," the one Michael and his son used to hum together in the truck. It began to play in the car, on its own, even when the radio was off. At first, Michael thought it was just a glitch, faulty wiring, random chance, until one evening, he stepped into Joshua's room for the first time since the accident. Saturday, down in the old wooden chair his son used to study in, opened the laptop without thinking, and on the screen was a single note, "If I ever leave this world behind, I'll still be with you. J. No time stamp." No record of when it was written. No one even remembered Joshua typing it. But Michael knew. He recognized his son's words. From that day on, something in the stubborn old man softened. He didn't become a believer overnight. He didn't start going to church. But he began sitting in Joshua's room each night, just to talk. He'd talk about his wife, the neighbor's leaky faucet, a litter of puppies born behind the garage, the little things, the kind of stories they used to share before silence moved in. And one night, he said aloud, "If you really are out there, then I'm still here. Just to let you know, this love never ended." Someone once asked Michael, "Do you really believe your son still exists?" He shook his head. "I don't know." Then he looked at his son's photo and smiled quietly. "But I know I'm not alone anymore." Michael's story isn't science. It's not theology. It's not meant to be debated, but it is one among millions. Stories of people who lost someone and yet somehow keep living, with a quiet belief that real love doesn't die. It simply changes shape, from an embrace to a breeze, from a voice to a dream, from a person sitting next to you to a quiet presence that says, "I'm still here." You may not believe it, or maybe you once did until grief took that belief away. But if there's one thing that keeps us holding on, even after everything breaks, it's the hope that the most beautiful part of human connection doesn't end beneath the soil. Michael's story could be anyone's story. It might even be yours. If love still exists, could the soul still exist too? There's a question most people are afraid to face. If my loved one is truly gone forever, then what happens to all this love, all these memories, all this longing? It's not easy to accept that someone who once laughed, held you, cried for you, is now just a name etched on stone. Because, deep down, we still feel something hasn't been lost. Stoicism, often seen as dry and detached, never denies the reality of pain. Epictetus once said, "You may weep, don't be ashamed, but weep as one who always knew this would pass, and if everything is destined to pass, then the real question is, does anything remain after the passing?" The answer might not come from a preacher, not from a scientist, not from anyone who claims to know. It comes from lived experience. Look at your own life. Revisit the small moments and ask yourself, did everything truly vanish? Or did something continue just in another form? Here are 6 quiet signs, not to make you believe, but to make you wonder, because sometimes it's the smallest things that speak the loudest from the unseen. Sign 1. Love remains, even when the person is gone. Think of the first person you ever loved deeply. Maybe it was a parent, a partner, a child, a sibling. That person may no longer be here, but you still love them. You don't need their presence. No messages, no phone calls, no hugs. The love is still alive, as if they were still somehow within you. But how can you love someone who no longer exists, if their soul has vanished? If love is just a chemical spark, then why does your heart still ache, still whisper their name, still feel heavy years later? Maybe true love doesn't need a body to exist. Maybe it transcends time and distance. Maybe it exists as an energy that death cannot destroy. Sign 2. When someone leaves, they leave traces inside you. Look at how you live today. You might fold clothes the way your mother did, cook using your grandmother's recipe, speak to your child the same way your father once spoke to you. You still play that song, the one that belonged to the two of you. They may be gone, but they never really left. They live on through memories, habits, gestures, and the way you now love others. If the soul is something that leaves echoes in our consciousness, then you, the ones still breathing, are the place where they now reside. Not in a mystical way, not in a ghost story, just as a simple truth. A part of a person can continue to live inside another. Sign 3. The quiet dreams that feel like silent reunions. Have you ever dreamed of someone who's passed? Not a nightmare, not a hallucination, just a moment. They appeared in your sleep. No preaching, no explanations, just standing there, smiling, or placing a hand gently on your shoulder. You woke up not crying, but calm. Some say those dreams are just the subconscious comforting itself. But why do they come exactly when you're about to break? Why on the anniversary? Why with such clarity those eyes, that voice, the way they sat exactly as you remember? Maybe it's how those we've lost step into our dreams, just to say, keep going. Sign 4. The feeling that someone is still here. Have you ever been alone in a room and felt something familiar? Not fear, but presence, a quiet closeness, as if someone is still watching you, not with eyes, but with the same gaze that once made you feel safe. You don't see them, but you feel them. You can't name it, can't prove it, but you also can't deny it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "We are part of a whole, and each soul has its place in the flow of the universe." Maybe the one you love returned to that whole, but still chooses to stay close, in a different form. Sign 5. The quiet coincidences that feel like whispers. Have you ever seen 11:11 right when you were thinking of someone who's gone, turned on the radio, and their song came on? Saw their birth date appear randomly on receipts, license plates, clocks. The rational mind calls it coincidence, but those who've loved deeply know better. A mother who lost her daughter once said, "Every time I'm about to fall apart, a purple butterfly lands on my hand, the same color shirt my daughter wore the day she left. I don't care if no one believes me. I just know it's her. Not a voice, not a figure, just a sign. Small enough for the world to miss, but loud enough to make a grieving mother want to live again." Sign 6. The silent longing that pulls you upward. Strangely, after losing someone, many people don't collapse into despair. Instead, something awakens. A quiet urge to live better. A soft belief in something beyond. A desire to one day see them again. Not traditional religion, not fear of hell or hope for heaven. Just this: I want to see that face again, one more time. Maybe that desire itself is proof that the soul is real. Because if humans were only flesh, then love would die with the body. But it doesn't. It changes shape. It keeps breathing. So what keeps it alive? Maybe it's the soul. Maybe it's that invisible part of us, the one that has no name, but everyone has felt. Stoicism doesn't demand you believe anything. It simply invites you to listen to your own heart when it quietly says, "I'm still connected to something beyond death." And if that's true, then maybe death doesn't separate us. Maybe it's just a curtain. And love is the only thing that passes through it. If you see yourself in any of these signs, hold on to that. Not because it proves anything, but because it gives you a reason to keep living, a reason to love more fully, a quiet hope that even when bodies return to dust, true love always finds a way back. No one truly disappears. If we keep living with undiminished love, take a moment. Close your eyes and think of the person you loved the most, but who is no longer here. Maybe it was the father who quietly watched over every step you took. Maybe it was the mother who made you warm soup on rainy days. Maybe it was a child you didn't get to hold one more time, or a life partner who walked beside you through your best years and left without a final goodbye. Do you still remember their eyes, the way they laughed, the phrase only they could say just like that? If so, then don't ever believe they've vanished, because no one truly disappears if they still live in the heart. Over the past hour, you and I have walked through a kind of sorrow that's hard to name. We weren't looking for logic. We weren't trying to build a philosophy. We were just being honest. Honest with the rawest part of being human. That when we love someone deeply, we don't want to be apart. That when we lose someone important, we're never the same. That even when the world tells us death is the end, our hearts still whisper, "I can feel them somewhere." So let's recall what we've discovered together. You've seen that love doesn't die just because a person is gone. You've realized your loved ones still live on, in the way you breathe, in the small habits no one taught you except them. You've seen them in dreams, not for answers, not for closure, just a glance that brings peace. You've sensed their presence, not in form, but in intuition, the deepest language of the soul. You've noticed strange coincidences that can't be explained, but arrived just when you needed a reason to keep going. You've allowed yourself to believe that maybe, someday, somewhere, you will see them again. And if all of that is real, what more proof do you need? No one truly disappears if love is still intact. No separation is final if we live with gratitude, devotion, and loyalty to the memories we carry. I know the world has trained you to be strong, to be rational, to accept that gone is gone. But some things, the more you try to deny them, the clearer they become. The more you try to forget, the deeper they root. The more you rush to move on, the harder it hits when you fall. So maybe, just maybe, we can choose another way. Not to replace the one we lost, but to continue what they once gave us. Stoicism never asks us to deny our grief. It teaches us to stand with it without losing our dignity. Not to become a shadow. Not to turn the dead into a burden. Instead, to make memory a source of strength. To turn love into fuel. To turn loss into the beginning of a deeper life. You don't need to believe in heaven. You don't need to know if there's an afterlife. You just need to believe this. The one who loved you doesn't want you to fall apart, doesn't want you to drown in sorrow, doesn't want you to waste the rest of your life because of one goodbye. They want you to live, but not just survive. They want you to live as if you are living for the part of them that stayed behind in you. If today you're still hurting, still missing someone, still wondering, will I ever see them again? Then maybe the answer isn't somewhere far away. Maybe it's in the way you choose to live. From this moment on, because if you live with a whole heart, if you keep loving as if they're still watching over you, then maybe you've never really lost them. No one truly disappears. Sometimes we just forget how to feel their presence through a different sense. Not with eyes, but with gratitude. Not with ears, but with the quiet breath in the middle of the night. Not with our hands, but with a meaningful life. And if one day you feel unbearably alone, remember this. A love that's real doesn't require physical presence to exist. A deep bond cannot be severed by death. A soul that once loved you never truly leaves. You just have to live honestly, love truly. And remember, with your whole being, everything else, let the universe take care of it. One final prayer for the one who has passed, and for you who are still here. You've just journeyed through nearly 60 minutes, not to find an absolute answer, not to confirm. We'll meet again in another world, but simply to listen to yourself. Maybe you're sitting alone in a quiet room. Maybe you're thinking of someone you can no longer call, no longer hug, no longer say, I love you, Mom, or I miss you, babe. Maybe you're still living each day with a heart that silently bleeds, a wound no one else sees. If that's you, then let me say just one thing. You are braver than you think. You didn't fall apart. Even when you wanted to, you kept living though no one asked you to. You stood up, even though the hand that used to hold yours is no longer there. And that, not everyone can do. The truth is, no one really gets over the death of someone they loved. We only learn how to live with that grief by growing a larger heart around it. We learn to smile while carrying a space that no one else can fill. We learn to love those who are still here, as if we're loving on behalf of the one who's gone. We learn to live, not to forget, but to carry forward. And then, if there truly is such a thing as the other side, I believe the person you loved will recognize you, not by your face, not by your voice, but by how you lived after they left, by the gentleness you now give to the world, by the steadiness you forged in chaos, by the eyes that once cried and now know how to smile again. We will meet again, though we don't know when, though we may not even call each other by our old names, but souls, when they are true, clear, and deeply bonded, do not lose one another. Believe that, not just with your mind, but with that deeper part inside you. And if you're still wondering, how will they know that I still remember them? Then the answer is simple. Live a life they would smile upon. It doesn't need to be extraordinary. It doesn't need to be celebrated. You just need to live honestly, kindly, and gratefully, and that is enough. Let me end this video with a quiet prayer. For the souls who have left, and for you who are still learning how to carry on, may what has been lost not be forgotten. May those who have departed find peace. May those who remain live with a heart that stays open. May love outlast even death. If fate allows, we will meet again in another video, or perhaps in another realm. But for now, thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to listen all the way to the end.